Welcome to Uncommon Ground. I'm Talal Yassine. My guest today is David Campbell, entertainment royalty, one of Australia's most versatile artists, known for his work on stage, screen, and television, but also for the way he's navigated identity, family, and fatherhood in the public eye. In this conversation, David opens up about the power and cost of performance, the lessons of family and fatherhood, and what audiences never get to see behind the bright lights of the entertainment industry. If you've ever wondered how to balance ambition with authenticity, or what it means to find your true identity in the spotlight, this is the episode you'll want to hear. David Campbell, welcome to Uncommon Ground.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Great. Well, take me back to when David Campbell first had his first recollection of the world. What's your first memories when you sort of realized you were a person in this world?
Wow. Of the world is a big question. So I'm from Adelaide in South Australia, from the northern suburbs there. So my dad's family and my mother's family were British and Scottish immigrants, and they came over, and I think they were 10-pound poms or soon around that time. They came over around the same time, and so I was brought up by my grandmother there. So my first, I guess, visual memory that I can think of is being a child in the northern suburbs there. It's very flat, very red brick council house. There's just a lot of land, a lot of heat. I think I remember an ABBA song being on the TV. So just that sort of thing, being aware of okay, so this is my first memory of the world. It's hot, it's flat, so if I would have been about three or four around that time, I think.
And talk me through, I guess, going to school, what it looked like, what it felt like. Which school did you go to? Primary school, I'm talking about?
Yeah, went to a couple of primary schools. So my grandmother, being brought up, which has been spoke about a lot, but I'll try and condense it as much as I can. But being brought up by my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, she'd already left her first husband, which was my mother's husband, and she'd adopted me and had left him and realized that she was probably going to need some help, and met another guy, and that guy's name was Campbell, and so they got married and I took his name, so that's how I got there. So I went to a school called Pracker Primary, which is again in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. They divorced, and he left, and we had a car, and also, and he took everything. I was brought up on a pension with my grandmother, a widow's pension. And I went to the primary school next door and met a whole bunch of new friends. And then I went to just a public high school in Adelaide, a very interesting public high school. It's no longer there. It was called Northwood High. It was in the around that area that I was brought up in, just north of Adelaide, this one. But it was also an agricultural high school, and they used to run sheepdog trials there. They used to be televised. Those are the days. That was good TV back then. We could probably bring that back and get a ratings bonanza. I'll speak to Stan about that. But it was a really interesting school. A lot of kids from around the area. But you didn't need to be interested in agriculture. You didn't need to come from the country. It was just the local public high school, and it was just one of the ones I went to.
And how was that experience? Do you remember it fondly?
I have only recently, in the last couple of years, been diagnosed with ADHD, and that's really helped me understand a lot more of things that I might have been angsty about in my past. High school years being one of them. I suffer with a lot of anxiety, I think, because of it, and because of the stuff that was going on in my life and the trauma I was trying to cope with and deal with, and identity and all those sort of things, as well as being a teenager. So I had a really good core group of friends. Like any other teenager, I could be a bit on the wild side, particularly in those days in Adelaide. We tended to, steal or borrow friends, licenses and go underage drinking and stuff like that. But for the most part, I had a really fun time with my friends. I just wasn't a good student, Talal. No spreadsheets, you know what I mean? I used to hang out with the music kids and, dream of being in bands. And then after a while, someone took a shine to me and said, "Oh, come join the rock band at school." And I did school musicals and stuff. Found a little bit of a tribe there, but yeah, really sort of got the bug around that time. But I have a really good core group of friends. A few of them I still speak to now.
And any brothers and sisters?
From my mother and father's end, I'm an only child. So, but I have, half brothers and sisters on both sides, but I don't really say the word half. I just don't see the point. They are I grew up loving them as brothers and sisters. So yeah, there's a lot. Do you want me to count them or are we
Yeah.
okay? I think okay. So if I've got so there's the tin lid, so that's four. There's me. I got two other sisters in Adelaide and another sister uh on my dad's side, and then I've got on my mum's side I got a sister brother. So there's 11 of us in my both sides of my family all up.
And you grew up, I imagine you grew up together, not in the same house, but you grew up in the
Yeah, but
same.
not knowing. Well, I grew up with Mahalia and EJ and Jackie and Ellie Mae. Once I knew my dad, I sort of grew up around them. And I mean, Mahalia was born when I first met them, so um, I think I don't know. There's a little bond between us that maybe that we've always had that bond because we were the first two together. I'm much older than her, but I remember EJ and Jackie and Ellie all being born, and so growing up with them. My sister and my brother on my mother's side is a little different because of all the like people wanting to know who I was and not wanting to know who I was, and that side of the family was very confusing. Um, so that was confusing for them, and so it's hard to explain to children and that. So they didn't grow up as brother and sister to me till much later. And then you pick up a few extra sisters along the way, and in rock and roll, why not? One of them I went to high school with, which was really wild.
Right. Well, that's fascinating for me because I came from a family of 8.
There you go.
One mum, dad, one house. And
In how big a house though? What are we talking?
4 bedrooms where most of the boys slept in one room.
How many boys? How many girls? What are we?
6 boys, 2 girls.
Wow.
In
Those 2 girls had it
Western
made in the
Sydney.
shade.
Oh, they still do.
Yeah.
They still do. And so I'm fascinated by that because it's like you grew up in a similar family, just not living together one at the same time,
Yeah, and it really made a lot of my decisions as a parent quite, was formative for my decision as a parent, I should say. Because I grew up as an only child for a long time and did feel very lonely around that. It wasn't until I started to have brothers and sisters and sort of identify with them. I mean, there was a lot of other issues with geography and time I got to spend with them, but I really did and really do rely. I mean, I see them all the time, and we work together all the time, so they mean a lot to me. Particularly on the barn side. I'm not that my others don't, but because I work in the same industry as them, and we get to spend more time together. Mahalia and I have been neighbors, and our kids have grown up together, and we vacation together as families all the time. I just saw EJ the other day. Ellie was on my show. Jackie is all over the world, but he comes in and goes, and he's so busy. So I love being. I wasn't really a big fan of being an only child, and I love having brothers and sisters. That's why I don't call them half brothers and sisters. I love having a wider family. So when we had Lisa and I, Lisa was an only child, but she loved being an only child. She really loved that. Um, so I had to convince her and bring her to the table to be like, oh, I just think it would really be great for Leo to, he's had this only child experience for, 5 years, maybe another brother or sister would be great. And then, twins, you can't predict these things. So instant, big family.
David, talk me through how old you were when you discovered the other side of your family, so to speak, as in the barn side, and what happened then? Tell me about it.
Well, I mean, it was never really a secret that we knew who my dad was. And that was, it was always like, I remember watching the Forever Now clip on TV on like Donny Sutherland Sounds or some old show like that. And my grandmother saying, "Oh, we know him. He's a friend of the family. He grew up in our area." And I probably didn't ask too many other questions than that. I have a very vague memory of him coming to a house I lived in, which was close to my first primary school. And we lived down some flats down a big driveway. And he came in one night with lots of long hair and jeans. And all I remember is long hair and jeans. And then the next day having this cassette of the Cold Chisel original album with that yellow cover, that iconic yellow cover, that almost painting, and thinking, what on earth? Because I was brought up with my grandmother. So I was listening to Johnny Mathis and I was listening to, Art Garfunkel's Bright Eyes was big in my house. And all of a sudden, here's a song about Vietnam vets. I'm like, what the f- is going on here? So once I found out, he came back into my life when he married Jane. So around the time of The Last Stand with Cold Chisel, and Jane and he had a kid, and she famously found a picture of me in his wallet. that had Mahalia. And she's like, "Who is this?" And he was like, "Whoops, it's my son." I'm paraphrasing here. This is not how he said this, but I've told the story a lot, so I'm trying to make it a bit more entertaining. Um, and so she was like, "Well, he must be in our lives. He's got a sister now. He has to be in a part of our lives." So they reached out to my grandmother. She and I came over to Sydney. My dad had a week off the show, and I think she just wanted to check that he wasn't the wild man of rock and roll that was being portrayed smashing up the Countdown stage. Uh, and he was that, but he was also a family man. And I think that made her feel like, okay, he's still the Jimmy that we knew growing up. He's got a wife, family. Great. David can come over in school holidays. And so I started to see them in school holidays, or if he came to town. I was about 10 years old. And that was, tricky dealing with that because, as I said, I lived in a council house with my grandmother in the northern suburbs of Adelaide. We did not have much. She was very proud, really working class English woman, there is a pride in that sort of culture of like, we don't have much, but what we have, we love. We are there's a lot of pride in family and togetherness. Um, and then you'd have this whirlwind of like rock and roll and do you want an Atari? You get an Atari. Do you want some new clothes? Here's some new clothes. And they'd be there for 3 or 4 days and then they'd be gone. It'd be like tumbleweeds. And like, I guess I don't get those presents anymore. And it's like, you know what I mean? So there was a real push and pull that I found very disjointed as a child and no one was explaining it to me. No one knew what that was and no one knew how to parent it. And so I had no blame for anyone on this. I think I did more when I was younger, like, oh, they should have taken care of me. But what were they to know? As a parent now, you go, how? No one, there's no therapy in the 80s. No one's, Woody Allen was doing therapy in the 80s. That was about one guy, that was it. No one really spoke openly about that sort of stuff. So, um, and so the harder part, I think, was discovering that the woman that I thought was my sister was my mother, and that whole side of the family schismed. It changed, and it became a very different dynamic because my father was just going to be my father. Um, but when people had spent 10 years sort of withholding information for a child to protect the child, um, the onus then came to me on this day when my grandma sat me down and said, "This is the situation. I'm not your mum. She's your mum." She wasn't there, but she's like, she's your mum. Your sister is your mum. That really, I remember that being a schism is a good word, a moment in time of fracturing my life, fracturing my childhood, fracturing everything I knew to be authentic in my life. And in a strange way, the chaos of my dad coming in and out was easier to deal with than this because what happened was the family then in Adelaide tried to corral around me. And I've been brought up with these people as like brothers and sisters, these older people. And I wasn't a fool. I knew they probably, weren't. I knew I was adopted. I didn't know how because my grandmother was adopted. So I knew that was cool. It's cool to be adopted. But I didn't realize that I was adopted within the family. And I didn't realize that they were then going to turn to me and say, "What do you want to do now? What do you want to call me?" And I had like people say, "So I suppose you want to call me granddad now?" Or do you want to call like what do you my grandmother saying, "Well, I'm still your mum." And I'm going, okay. And my mother being really broken by this because she was so young when she had me. And the truth of it all coming out. And I guess now when I think about it, her not having the agency and the control of telling me herself and having not only being so young and having a child taken from you because you're just so young. And so parents come in and swoop in and make a decision. And then they make a decision to adopt that child. But then they make a decision to tell that child without your knowledge. So I think that really was not great for her. Um, and having all these people when you're 10 turn to you and say, "Well, what do you want now? What do you want to do?" And I had to make that decision. And so I shut down. It was like, everyone has to stay the same. You can be my mother. You can still be my sister, even though I know you're not. You have to be not a grandparent. You're just going to be whoever it was just, I shut everybody down and I shut down a major part of my growth. And that had long-term effects as much as knowing and finding out about my dad had long-term effects to cope with. And it took me a long time to find those balances, and that working on that now, and I guess finding my way as a parent is about fixing those mistakes in my life and making sure those mistakes aren't brought forward to my own children and beyond.
I've got a 9-year-old son, and that would be traumatizing for him. And you must have went through a lot to repair the broken world.
And it's on you to repair them. You know, I held my mother and she cried in my arms like a child.
And you were 10.
And I was 10 because of the trauma she was dealing with. And I think still deals with a bit to this day. You know, I don't want to speak too much about what she copes with, but it was that really, you know, women who went through this, young women who went through this time, who, you know, had children and they came back as cousins in families. It was very common. I'm not saying that that thing is not common, but we don't talk enough about what that did to those young girls and what it did to their, you know, and what they lived through. That's their story to tell. It's not really my story to tell, but I feel very protective of her because of that. And I've had to deal with my anger at members of my family who didn't protect her and who didn't know what to do. And I've had to forgive the fact that they are not therapied. They didn't have the tools. What were they supposed to do? So there's many, it's so nuanced, it's so layered. I try not to lay any blame at anyone's feet anymore because I'm too old for that. You know, really. All I can do is manage myself and manage how I react to these things and manage how I can react moving forward to these things, because it did dominate emotionally my life for a long time. And a lot of that was heightened by the fact that I did have anxiety and I did have ADHD and it was undiagnosed. And, you know, when you look back on a diagnosis now, you can go, oh my God, it all makes sense. Oh my God, that's so much easier now. And I can just go, okay, that's what all that was. So yeah, there's a lot of issues to it.
How old was your mother when she had you?
16. 16 when they were pregnant. They're about 3 weeks apart, my mum and dad.
Right. Okay. And tell me more about your relationship with your exceptional grandmother who raised you and your relationship with her.
It's tricky. She's a very incredibly strong, loving woman. She is a war baby. She came through the Blitz as a child. She was adopted by her parents. She found out when she was in her 20s. She'd already I think she was already on the road of starting her family at that stage. She came from, you know, a lot of struggles and brought her family out here for what they thought was a better life. I think a lot of British and people came out here thinking they were going to get a better life, and they just got more space and heat and brought all the troubles with them. You know, my dad talks about it in his book. But I think she did her best to raise the kids the best way she could. Um, you know, we deal with a lot of intergenerational trauma, and it is really hard to look through 2025's eyes on what people in 1973 and 1965 and earlier, how they deal with things. And so it has, you know, but she raised me. She was so strong and so strict and so loving and so there. And as I said, I just don't think had the tools to know what to do with this very modern problem that had just blown up into the life. But she did her best. She was amazing. But yeah, not without stresses.
How is it? Can you describe to me the relationship with your mother today?
It's a really a relationship that is built on continually trying to heal. She is a person who is almost wears a heart on her sleeve in a beautiful way, but also means she can get bruised very easily. And I think a lot of that springs from, you know, childhood trauma. I think I used to blame partly myself on that was maybe my fault because I don't know, of the situation that she was in because of me. You know, that I tried to own some of that, but it's actually not to do with me. But so I'm very protective of her, and we speak weekly, and my kids are getting to know her more and more, and they see her. And I can't. She lives in Adelaide. I can't see her that much, but it's very hard. I mean, they all had such hard lives, hard, hard lives, and survival is getting to a certain point is really difficult, and you have to live through a lot. And I have a lot of empathy and sympathy for them all. I think they do it with as much nobility as they can. And but yeah, then she and I speak all the time. We're very close.
You and I met at the Fathering Awards,
Mhm.
um, and your Father of the Year for 2024, 2025. And I want to come back to that, fathering, what you've learned, how you've learned it, because it's such an important skill that I think we're losing it in society, and the importance of fathering. Um, and what you've learned along the way from where you've come from, because everybody's got some kind of trauma, but that is particularly a difficult circumstance. And I'll come back to that. I want to go back to your childhood. You were 10, your world was, rumbled, so to speak, but you came out of it, not only with all the anxiety and the trauma, and you've gone on to, and I want to talk about career a bit. You've gone on to writing your own children's books, music, TV, Channel 9, even the voice of the koala newsreader on Zootopia,
Yeah,
um,
Australian edition. Yeah,
the Australian edition. Talk me through how you got from a boy in northern suburbs in Adelaide to an international star in so many areas.
That's a very generous thing to say, but I think a lot of it was to do with the fact, because of the discipline that my grandmother gave me as a child, in those early formative years, there was a lot of like boundaries and a lot of love and a lot of like what to do and what not to do and what was right. She had a good moral sense. That was very helpful, particularly when a rock and roll comes into your life. So that helps get you back on the track to that. I had great teachers that noticed, even though I may not have been a good student, I might have been good in other things, even though it was a public high school in the 80s and no one really talked about arts so much. So they put me in shows, or they put me in bands, or they asked me to host an evening of the students thing because I could talk underwater. And then pointed me in the way as I left school to youth theatre in Adelaide, which got me to youth theatre in Sydney, because I knew, and I think also having a parent that left town and went and did something. There's a lot of talk about Nepo babies in the last few years in media, but I think Nepo babies are in every industry. If you're a lawyer, you might have, Sanderson and Sons because the son's a lawyer. That's a Nepo baby. It's the same thing in the industry. You emulate as a child what you see. And I saw a lot of people around me that didn't leave. And I saw one person who did. And I thought, well, I want to see the world. And he would take me on holidays and with the family and take me to Thailand or Hong Kong. And I saw parts of the world which I never thought I'd ever see as a teenager. So I had a wanderlust of that. And I also thought that combined with something might get me somewhere. So I had drive because I didn't go to university. I have this sort of sense of having to educate myself and knowing that I'm behind the eight ball, because most people I work with are either professional journalists or they are professional actors who've been to major places like NIDA or whatever, and I've not had any of that. So I really come down hard on myself with how hard you have to work to catch up and learn and always be learning. And I see that in my dad. He's amazing at so many things, and he makes so many things look easy. But what I do see him from a young age was that he was always, and maybe this is Jane's influence or his influence, but he was always reading and learning and challenging himself and trying new things. And so I definitely picked up on that. And I think a lot of what I've done with my career has been through luck, has been through definitely connections. I'm not going to sit here and have someone yell at me that I'm not a Nepo baby. But when I was doing it, I tried not to let anyone know who my dad was when I first started out. Once again, that was the sort of throwback to my childhood. I tried to do that again when I got in the industry. And so a lot of it was like finding people who were good mentors, um, who did take an alternate path than rock and roll. It's like, hey, come do theater and you can paint a set and you can hang out and you can hang out on stage with people and help rig lights and also put on shows. And when that started to dry up, like, hey, have you ever thought of singing songs? How about Cabaret? And that sort of took me to America where no one knew who I was again. So it was this constant chase of like, oh, I really enjoyed that sort of a new world of like exploring and challenging myself and pushing myself into the deep end, where you either have to sink or swim. And I was a fast student, um, and I made a lot of mistakes. Um, I made a lot of errors, and a lot of that I can see now with hindsight and with knowing what my medication has provided for me and my stability now. Um, but those mistakes I now value. Um, yeah, there's no linear line. I mean, you said a lot of things that are successful now, but to get there, there's a lot of failure. There's albums that tanked. There's careers that started and burnt out that I tried. Um, there's roads that you burn because you're reckless. So there's a lot in there.
Kind of like my podcast career, right?
These are the lessons you learn, and you can't teach that. You have to live it.
Yeah. So give me a thumb for those who haven't followed the career, because you're so well known in all your appearances. In your view, a thumbnail sketch of the successes, because I absolutely agree. 9 times failure, 1 time success.
Yeah.
It's usually in that
Yeah.
order. So you came to Sydney, started shows at 22. Where'd it go from there?
No, I came to Sydney when I was 18, 19. I got an agent about the age of 20. Oh, no, I did my first show at the SDC at 19. And I was lucky. I worked with Jackie Weaver and Nick Enright. This amount. I was like green as gills. He was so green and was so wide-eyed and so like, what is going on? I had a couple more breaks after that, and then I started singing because I needed to make some money. So I started singing musical theater songs because I liked that. I grew up in musicals, and I seemed to have I had this ability within me to relate to these songs, like my dad did with rock and roll. I had with this. That got me into Cabaret. That got me seen by a guy called Michael Feinstein, who said you should do the New York Cabaret Festival. One of the few times I asked my dad for money for an airfare ticket and got a flight to New York and did this and stayed for 3 weeks was my intention and was there for about 4 or 5 years. Did the Rainbow and Stars, did the Rainbow Room, worked off Broadway, worked with Stephen Sondheim, and just had this amazing, amazing run and just met people who I still really value to this day who guided me and helped me out. And I had a lot of fun with, who are, super successful people. And then I came back here, did Shout was the big thing when I came back in 2001. Shout, I thought was going to lead me to my big rock and roll career. I got signed to Sony and that just didn't happen. I released a couple of singles that did okay. And then Sony sort of shrugged and went, this isn't working. Did a little bit of radio, did a little bit of TV work, but it was always on shows. I was always on from the early days of midday show singing with, Carrie Ann and being a guest on the couch to doing Sean McAuliffe's show on 9 to, being like just show hopping. What we see a lot of people doing now, that you just go and you show hop and you do this. There was so many shows back then. So I sort of learned how to be on camera and how to be a guest and watch how it was all working with auto cues and how to do that as well. Eventually I got back and did some more theater and met my wife doing that, released my first swing album through Sony. We came back to the template of like go old school and it worked. And because I was being true to who I was. And I sort of never turned back from there. And TV came at a great time in my life too. And I've been doing that now for 12, 13 years. And I still am stimulated by it all the time. You saw how jazzed up I was when I got here. We had a great show today. We've got great guests tomorrow. And I love asking people questions and having a conversation.
And how did you get to Channel 9?
So interesting. I was doing radio and I was getting I was doing other shows as well in Melbourne, and flying back and forth, and I was asked to do Dancing with the Stars, and I was asked once or twice before, and it didn't work out, or I turned it down. Wasn't sure. It was so big then. Like Tom had just done that big dance. Tom Williams had just done that big dance. It was like, and it blew up. It was so big, and so I was on the season after that. So it was myself, and it was Dawn Fraser and Dicko and Chris Barth and Ada Nicodemu, and it was just this collective of people, and we all got there, and Daryl was there, and Sonia Kruger was there, and I don't think Sonia and I have really met before, but we like got along like a house on fire. And I would go into the green as the live shows as they were back then, live, and we'd go in there, and sometimes Sonia would just be like in the green room, she'd just go, "Yeah, go, you do it, you do the interview," because we just would have fun. It was so loose. You wouldn't do that nowadays. Everything would be triple checked, and we would just have fun. And so when Sonia left 7 and went to 9 to take over the morning slot, they asked her who she wanted to work with. So she called me up and asked me to do it. And it was like, it changed my whole life. It changed my whole trajectory. And then, yeah, then we had that run, and then she went back to 7, and yeah, I'm still there.
Awesome.
Smartly, you've got to hold on to these things when they're there. If
Hey-
you enjoy it, you got to hold on to it. That's what I've learned.
Obviously, you're enjoying it a lot. It seems to me, like me, you got a bit of chip on the shoulder. My chip on the shoulder is that I've got way too many degrees. I am bored from Western Sydney, that's like Northern Adelaide. So I just continue to try to prove myself, There's always,
Is that a chip on the shoulder? I think that's an interesting term.
yeah, it's something you keep harking back to that's been resolved, but not in your mind. And a chip on your shoulder, I'm asking you about it, is that you're always trying to, like, you didn't go to university, you had a difficult start, Is that a true statement? Would you say that?
That I didn't go to university and I had a rough start, or that?
No, that you have a chip on the shoulder.
I would not see it as a chip on your shoulder. I would see that as an external value, that you have a chip on your shoulder. As I was brought up thinking you had a chip on your shoulder for that, someone in the room, and they're like, "Oh yeah, well I'll show you because I'm like this guy." Actually, I don't know how you describe it, but what I see is more of a self-flagellation of like, you're useless and you're worthless, and so that I see that far more as a self-worth thing than I see that as like I must prove myself. I see it as much more like, if you don't prove yourself, what you think about yourself is right. Is how I've come to see it. I don't think you're wrong in saying that there would be times in my career that it would have seemed that I was overtly arrogant and probably was covering a lot, or having a chip on my shoulder, or thinking I was being funny and smart when really I was just being, a bit of a shit. But actually it was hiding the fact that I just was beating the crap out of myself. Like, you don't deserve this. You're never going to be as big as your dad. No one really cares. If the term Nepo baby was there, I would have used that to beat myself up. Like there was Muhammad Ali and I was just standing in the corner, so I think I see it a little differently than that. Perhaps because I've just internalized the chip.
Indeed. And so I think, and I use it in the most, like, it can be used as a pejorative, a negative term. Like,
Yeah.
But I use it much more as internal, but I think the way you expressed it is much more accurate.
I think it's individual too.
Yeah, of course.
I have a question for you.
Please.
Not to take over this. You said before about like fathering in this country, and that we have an issue with it in this country. What do you mean by that?
So let's
Because I don't know if I fully agree.
let's get to
Okay.
let's get to the fathering discussion, because I think the fathering is one of the most important things in a family,
I agree.
as mothering is.
I 100% agree.
And so when I came to join this group, someone, Morris Newman, AC, rung me up, the corporate board director, an icon, says, "Talal, I sit on a board of Australian Fathering Project and Australian Awards, and I'd like you to consider joining us on the panel." And I said, "Oh, of course, Morris." Getting a call from one of the legendary directors in the country, and he said to me, "I'd like you to consider joining it." And then I said, "Let me think about it." Of course,
Did you tell him about all the degrees you had from?
No, I didn't. I went and got another degree before I joined.
That sounds like something you and I would do.
That's right. And then I asked around a bit, and people would say, like, why? What about mothering? Mothering's important. And then I met Kati, who's the CEO, and I realized that, and I put the question to her directly. What about mothering? I mean, aren't people going to think, well, you're kind of joining the men's movement, so to speak?
Right, yeah.
And then she said, this is run by women, the whole institution, because fathering is so important. And then I realized in my life, I had my father, I had the complete opposite experience. My father was always there. He actually never left the house. We had 8 kids. He was our taxi driver.
Of course.
And he worked at James Hardie, but he then finished with a compo case. And my father drove us around for 30 years, forced mostly by my mother to take.
I bet you he loved it.
And he loved it. And so I had the exact and he never flew in and gave me a guitar or.
But he was there.
He was always there.
Uh-huh.
And so for me, that led to the realization of what my confidence, because I've had discussions with other people, like I never had an internal thought that said, because there's always 2 people. There's David Campbell that I'm talking to, and there's David Campbell in their mind. And what that mind says to you could be negative or positive. And I realized a lot of people have this voice in their head that says, you're not good enough, you're not fast enough, you're not as good as your dad, you're not as good as your cousin, you won't make it. And I realized that I've got a chip missing, because my voice is like the American cheerleader. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4, go Talal, I never had that internal, I had other chips. Other chips. Boy from Western Sydney, Muslim background, wrong side of every bridge in Sydney, wrong side, wrong religion, wrong party, wrong. And so, as you said, it's individual. But one of the things why I end up joining the Australian Fathering Council is I realise that we have an issue with it in Australia because we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about it enough openly. And the contribution of fathers is so important to have a father figure in your life.
Yeah.
Whether it's your biological father, and I'm going to ask you a question about getting back to that. And I was lucky enough to have my biological father and a fathering figure and other fathering figures in my life, because it completes the picture. It completes the picture. And it was always very delicate in terms of the women's movement and the men's movement, and they sort of pitted against each other. But in reality, they're not. They've got to work in union. They've got to work in union. And so that's the answer to the question about what I meant by that. And so going to yourself, I guess, now that you've got your own family and want to call it break the chain.
You call it that? You can call it break the chain.
What advice would you give to people listening to this saying, I've got an issue, a trauma, coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
How do you break that chain?
The one thing I will say is that it's never too late to attack the issue and to interrogate the issue. It's never too late. I've just recently watched my dad's latest documentary, Working Class Man, which is based on the book of the same name, which was a very traumatic time in his life when he was super successful and when the demons really started coming home to roost that he talks about from his childhood. When we started to deal with his trauma, I'd already had like Leo, and I guess I'd had the twins too. Yeah. So that's late in life to understand a parent and what they're going through. And when I would go to his concerts, particularly the concerts when he was dealing with breaking down his own image, his own, I don't like the word toxic masculine image, but like the image of the rock and roller with a bottle of, vodka and the bandana and just would smash anyone in the face that gets in his way or scream to the back of the rafters sort of thing, that gave men this impetus of like, yes, he sees me, he's like us, he broke out. But it also, when I saw that person 30, 40 years down the track saying, hey, I have real trauma here that I'm now coming to terms with and I'm dealing with, and I'm allowing my family to deal with me as co-pilots on this trauma, and to get them so they can understand me better. I saw men at the concert that he was talking about with that breakdown and cry, and women come up to me and say, he's never spoken to me about anything. I love him, but I knew something was wrong. And watching my dad show them the way of like, it's okay, fellas, we can put our shoulders down now and let go. That says to me that it doesn't matter when you do it. You can do it in your 20s, you can get it done straight away, and God love you if you do, because you'll have a better life. But if you haven't done it, there's no shame. And I kind of want to take, I spoke about this somewhere else as well, but there was, when my dad and I got this, and some comedian in Melbourne on radio was like, oh well, yeah, Jimmy Barnes, he's a great father figure, and look at the trauma he's all had, and look at all the kids. I'm like, what are we doing here? What are we doing if we're saying to men that you should be ashamed of the trauma, or we're saying that it doesn't matter who you are, you can't make up for past mistakes? Is 60 too late? Is 69, my dad's age, too late to make up for past mistakes? Is 70 too late? And can we not change that narrative? Can we not fix the narrative of ourselves as men in this country? And this is where I'm going to come back to the other point you made, is that I actually do think there are more men out there. I see them. I see dads pushing prams. I see dads out with kids by themselves with the baby Bjorns, more than I've ever seen in my life in the last 15 years. And I think more younger men are stepping up and going, I know what I missed, and I know what I need to fix. I think the media paints sometimes a different picture. We're all guilty of it. We were all run by algorithms and what they throw at us, and like, this person's terrible, let's pounce on it. I do think in Australia there's more and more men that are stepping up to the challenge of fathering and really are embracing it. And that means it is confronting. It makes you feel vulnerable. It brings up stuff from your childhood that maybe you lacked or missed or want to fill the void with. And I think to do that openly with your partner, if you can, or maybe you're separating, you're co-parenting, there is no judgment on how you do it. As long as you are there, like they were in young Talal's life, as long as you are there in that life, trying to guide those humans that you were brought into the world, they did not ask to be here, and try to give them the best next part going forward in their lives by making the ground fertile from them and not laying raise to it and saying, no, I'm going to be destructive. But if you have been destructive, I still want you to be able to come back to the table and fix it. I still want you to have the space for men to come back and go, I was an addict. I cheated. I did this. I did that. I'm sorry. It's because of these other things, and I'm going to fix them. I'm not going to use this as an excuse for the rest of my life. I'm going to try and fix these things. I still think there's that. Where I think sometimes as a whole, and I'm coming back to another round point of yours again, we need to mentor more. We need to put our arms around fathers and say, all right, let's go further. Like there's some of the dads that I accepted with last year who are running sports groups in WA for, as an Indigenous leader for young kids out there, and getting them engaged in footy and keeping them off the streets and engaged with their community, whether it's, Indigenous or non-Indigenous, it doesn't matter. Unbelievable, doing much better work than I am. There's another dad out there who started a father's group because one was missing, because mothers had mothers groups. Much better work than me being on the telly talking about my backstory over and over and again, including on this podcast. However, we all have a space. What I try to do now as a father with my kids, there was so much oversharing, Talal, in my life as a child. They told me every little nook and cranny about their lives. Once they'd opened that door to like, hey, guess what? You're not who you think you are, and these are all the people now. They've taken their masks off. What do you think? After that, I just heard every little story, every backstory, every cheating boyfriend, girlfriend. They drank in front of me. There was domestic violence. There was abuse. I saw it all as a kid, and we have to protect children. They are not our friends. Sometimes my kids will ask me something. I'm like, this is not a deposition. You do not get to ask me about my life. Some things will remain with me, and I'll tell you when it's age appropriate. That's what this is. You're not my friend. You're my child. I love you. We will be friends as you get older, but you're my child. And I will, in my head, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do, is protect you. And I think a lot of us overshare too much, either it's on social media or here. Those things come home to roost. Your kids are going to find out. And they're going to find out anyway, but it's about how you time that and how we deliver the information and how we deliver them so when they're ready to accept things in the world, they've seen that you've evolved, the people you've surrounded yourself with have evolved with you, and that it's safe for them to evolve on whatever journey they've got. Does that answer the question in a roundabout way?
Answers
I
very
tried
directly.
to take it like in a big worldview that you threw it at me then and throw it back at you.
What makes a good father?
I'm only going to speak on my behalf. I think the being there thing is something I come back to a lot. Consistency. And that means when you don't want to be consistent. That means when you want to give in and you've said something and it's easy to give in, but actually, you know what? I'm going to say no again. No is the word I'm going to come back to. My grandmother was very good at that. Vulnerability. Sometimes I just let my kids see me cry. Not all the time. I had a great cry in the car yesterday. Didn't tell them, none of their damn business. But I sometimes let them see me cry. Is it at a movie? Is it something that they did? Is it a memory I bring up on my phone and I let them see it? I think that's good. And then trying to be as good a force as you can in your community and the world. Not being a dickhead like I've been in the past sometimes. Showing them that, you know what, if you put good out there, people will warm to that. My wife is so much better than it than I am. I've learned so much from her, but I try to do it in my own space to learn more and more that the more you help people in your community, the more that you can talk to people and be friendly with them. And I'm lucky. I'm on telly. People seem to love having a chat and saying hi. And I watched my dad do that as a kid. I always stop and say hi and have a chat. And I'm always happy to. But I also like my local pharmacist. I like the woman who worked in Coles that we always see every day. These are all of our friends too. And I make sure I make my kids warm to the idea of like, this is your community. Go out there, be confident and spread as much positivity as you can. So I think a lot of it is those three things. I saw Bob Odenkirk talk the other day, from Better Call Saul on a podcast. And he was talking, he said, what do you miss? He said, I miss the driving around. He said, I miss the Talal Dad era. He said, those people who are still in that, he goes, you've got it. You don't know that that's the one. And what I try to tell my kids now, something that I didn't understand, and sometimes I hear it a lot, is people who say, oh, those were the days. Those were the days. And these are the days that we're having we will look back on this time and go, oh, that was a good time. Let's acknowledge it now.
One of the things I've learnt at the Australian Fathering Project or Council is that you spend very little time with your young children before they become adults. In fact, less than a third.
Yeah.
Probably less than 20%. And these are the times when you're driving around to cricket and they're late or they're early or waking up or sending them to school. And I remember in my days, we had 8 of us. Like we had 7 under 10 at one stage.
Parents.
And yeah, and they were,
God bless them.
yeah, they were like, and it wasn't like it was one household, one mum, one dad.
The chaos.
It was absolute chaos. It was absolute chaos. But it was fun,
Look how you're smiling, remembering it.
It was fun.
Yeah.
We don't remember being poor or, working with Vinnie's. We had Vinnie's. We were customers of Vinnie's. We were customers of a Smith family.
Yeah.
And we were refugees, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I have learned from my father was not only being there, but he never had a problem with me having other father figures.
Oh, God, no.
Would you agree with that? Like, did you have any other father figures?
Not
like Jimmy wasn't there for obvious reasons.
Not in my younger years. I had like guys and mentors like help me later on and like, oh, this is what you should do and go over here, like managers and stuff like that. And that was really important. And I probably leaned into that in a needier way than I probably needed to at the time. But I did need that. I needed someone to help guide me because there was no one guiding me. And even then it was human. It didn't give me all the answers. But I see that with my kids now. I'm not very sporty. I don't know if you can see that in me, but I do have a couple of boys who love sports. And especially my younger son plays footy and we've got a great set of coaches at the moment. And I really lean into like, you go speak to them, go hang with, they'll give you advice, or a good teacher will give you advice. Man, a good teacher, changed my life, good teachers, And so I think good father figures, whether they're a man or a woman as well, because The guidance is the guidance. The gift is the gift. Doesn't matter who delivers the gift, it's the gift. Is so important for young people in their lives, and for for daughters to see their dads treating their mothers well, and to like know that they have a good set of friends that they can rely on too, that are also men. It's that community thing I was talking about before, who you surround your kids with. Because I'm a big fan of like we've got I'm not very religious, but we have like godparents for each one of my kids. And mate, they are essential to coming in and just like, yeah, deal with this. Yeah, go talk to your godfather about that. He's good. Go talk to him. He knows. You know.
I want to bring it back to fatherhood in this sense. And so maternal love, a mother's love, a grandmother's love, an auntie's love is legendary and true.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, in the Islamic religion, the love between a mother and child, or a woman and a young child, is the uterus called the house of mercy.
That's wonderful.
The house of mercy, Bait al-Rahm. And a woman's love and mercy is legendary. I mean, it is the strongest thing in the world. Coupled with that ought to be paternal love,
Mm-hmm.
fatherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And, my dad loved in a very particular, quiet, sedate, stoic.
Mm-hmm.
She'll be right, mate. The Lebanese Aussie version of that, but she'll be right, mate. And I ask you that question, and always where I'm leading to is that when I grew up a bit and I needed a different kind of paternal love, which I didn't get in my ego. My uncles were exactly the same as my dad.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Surrounded by stoics.
Stoics. She'll be right, mate. You're dead? No, you're okay.
Yeah, exactly. Which is also, it's a good lesson. We don't teach that much anymore. We're coming back to the stoics, but
yeah,
we lost it for a bit.
But what I found in my experience, and I'll ask you, is I found some older blokes in the community who just had that. It's a different kind of love and a different kind of advice and a different kind of support. So I'd go to my father and say, "Hey, Dad, I just got a master's in law. Good on you, son." It was like, good, that's it. But if I said I had this business idea about doing this, and it wouldn't even be present, right? I found other people, a guy called Haj Adi Marabani, who came to Australia in 1956, who was educated, etc. He was like, "What a great idea, son. How about you look at it this way and that way and pile this on, and he'll ring me 2 days later. I've been thinking about it. Have you thought?" That really encouraged me. I mean, did you have anybody like that in your life?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people that I collaborated with, I think in arts do that. Directors do that. That when you're doing shows and you're offering up ideas, those ideas are either rejected or nurtured. And a good director nurtures them and teaches you to grow, and that can lead into your life. But I don't know if I had that as much as you did. It sounds amazing because I think you're supposed to outgrow your parent. I don't blame your dad there at all. Like if my son,
No blame.
My son plays football in the under 10s, and I don't know what's going on. He's already outgrowing me. And that's a beautiful thing. I want him to. That's why I want him to go find other people to talk to about it, and other parents and other dads and coaches. It is so important. So no, I didn't really have that too much. I had a manager who was around for a while that was really good, but and that sort of got me onto the musical path and really validated my talent there. And I think that what you're talking about is a validation. It's a validation of who you are, a validation of your talent, of your natural born gifts, whether that's law, whether that's music, it doesn't really matter. But having an external person outside of the family saying, "Hey, you know what? You're onto something. That's a good idea," I think is really important.
Agree. What's your relationship with your dad these days? What's it like with Jimmy Barnes?
That's great. He's so busy, and that's the thing. We're both really busy men. And probably the blessing of being his son and the curse of it that I really have to pull myself up on is that I want to be a workaholic. That's a comfort to me, is to be busy. Maybe it's my background, or maybe it's the sort of coming from having not a lot and then seeing abundance and then it being going away again, is that sort of like you've got to work and work and work and work. It's a real working class thing. It's an immigrant thing that I think a lot of cultures share. So I've never lost that. I don't believe in retirement. I'm a singer. If TV stops and I keep singing and people stop coming, then I'll stop. But until then, my favorite singers like Tony Bennett, he literally went right through Alzheimer's, and so I see that as a gift, and I shouldn't let go of that. Um, what that does do, though, is it does create a bit of more distance between my dad and I geographically and work-wise than I'm probably happier with. But at the end of the day, I'm nitpicking now, because what's happened in the healing in the last 10 to 12 years of his books, and him allowing my sisters and brothers to sort of openly see him and his vulnerability and his trauma and who he is, that what I was coming back to before, of like, there is no age limit to that. Allowing your children to see when they're ready to see what's going on can be incredibly healing for a family. And it allowed us to let go of a lot of it. It allowed me to let go of a lot of things. And so now I sort of relish watching him become a grandparent and watching him doing grandparent duties. But in the last few years, he's had a lot of health things as well. So we've been dealing with different stresses than we would just my relationship with him. It's more about getting the kids to see him when he can, and being that's often why the time we're all so good on stage, because that's our time. It's really weird. I feel that with my sister and I uh, do a lot of stuff together, Hayden and I, and I feel really relaxed when she's there on stage. And for however many people, it doesn't matter. It's almost like we're in our own world. It's very strange. And I feel that sometimes we all do my dad's shows and everyone's, and we're all just there mucking about, and yet there's 30,000 people singing Flame Trees in front of us. And it's wild. It's so wild. It's this sort of strange weirdness of this life that we've been blessed to be in, this life of the gift that he gives people, and we're all still finding each other as family on stage with that. It's great. It's hard to describe.
It's wonderful. The
It's
smile on your
bloody
face
wonderful.
says it all. A more specific and direct question for those who are listening to this podcast, all three of them.
It's going well.
It's going well.
Please like and subscribe. We'll be right back.
You've done this before.
No, just listen to a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of driving, don't you know?
So someone who's struggling, successful, unsuccessful, they're in their life, they're a father, they want to be better or they want to fix something. What advice would you give them? Apart from it's never too late.
Yeah, it's a good question. It depends on the problem. If it's an internal problem, one step at a time. It's the old adage, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? You can't deal with the whole problem. And it's okay to ask for help. I think too many dads of my generation and older, and maybe sometimes younger, still don't ask for help enough. And, we have a crisis with a lot of men in this country taking their lives. My best friend was one of them. And I did not know, didn't see it coming, didn't ask for help. He was texting my wife, making jokes the night he left us. And so it was a shock. And so asking for help as mates or wives or partners, that is A1. The other stuff is, I'm really into how small this world is. As it gets quite overwhelming out there, there's a lot of doom scrolling, there's a lot of things that don't look great out there at the moment. I think that the more we not retreat, but the more we take care of those around us, and whether that's just the person next to you, deal with the thing that's in front of you and worry about the rest of the world. Okay, this project's not going to work. You might need to pivot, but let's put it down and deal with what's in front of you. And sometimes it's good just to come back to the home and the kids. Often when I'm feeling not very good or a bit useless, I'm starting to do things like, I'm going to teach myself how to bake and make my kids happy baking a cake. May not be a good cake, I'm going to try. I've been making muesli bars now for the last 10 months, nonstop every week, because it makes me happy to be in the kitchen doing something else that's providing nutrition. And it's a simple thing. Some people garden. I see a lot of dads that just go out there and potter around it. I think pottering is underrated. Pottering is the best. Pottering in Crocs, goat level. And I salute all dads that do that. And, it's just about going into your garage and going, just going to give it a little bit of a clean today. It might still be messy, just today. Just clean that one area. Start small if it's a big problem, And if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, come back to the house, come back to the family, come back to the community.
What advice would you have for people who just don't, they've got a family, it's just not coming together? I know I'm getting very specific, but I think it's really important because these conversations partly, I know you've said it a million times and you've been the Father of the Year for now a year, and but so many people don't hear this conversation. So many men at the pub, at the coffee shop, at the pottery, don't get to have this conversation with people who are well known and they trust. And I think we've lost that a bit, and I want to go explore that. The background of that question is, I mean, as men grow older, it's a well-known fact that they have less and less friends. Women keep their relationships. They keep their social enterprises, whatever format, they keep that communication, which provides that support. Most men over 40 cannot name one best friend. A best friend is someone you can call at 2 a.m. and want to have a conversation with. And so it talks to that. How would you deal with that, and how do you deal with that?
Are you asking what advice I would give?
Yes.
Is that you probably do have a friend, but you just don't know it. During the dark times of COVID, every time I got a COVID vaccine, the one side effect I would have was this abject feeling of loneliness. And I would sit there and the kids would go to bed and they sit and my wife, well, you're right. I'm like, I have no one in my life. I have no friends. This is it. This is all I've got. She goes, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I don't know. But I actually think that it's not something that I think it exasperated a problem that I actually do kind of feel sometimes, even though I'm surrounded by lots of people. Who am I calling that are my friends? And actually, you just have to make a little effort. And the little effort is saying, brother, I'll meet you down the pub at 5. Not that I drink anymore, but that's a good option. Or, hey, meet me for a coffee. Or, what are you doing? Do you want to go to the footy? Or, a lot of my friends I work with because they're in my band, or, my best friends are in my band and I see them regularly. So I'm lucky there. But it might be like, hey, I'm thinking of going back into boxing. I've found this gym down the road. Please come with me, or come check it out with me. I think we forget as men that we need to. What women are great at is communicating. What men are good at is sitting on their phones and thinking, everybody's got it better than me. And not all men, but like a lot of us. I certainly feel that way from time to time. I certainly get dragged into the social media, everyone's having a perfect life crap. When actually, all you got to do is pick up a phone or text a mate. Or I've got this app on my phone called Marco Polo. It's really good because I think a lot of guys feel like no one listens. And this is a video app, and I've got several friends. I've got 2 high school friends from Northwood High, my best mate who lives in America. I've got another best mate who lives in America, and I've got a group of friends that my wife and I are a part of. They're all in theatre, and we all leave. It's a video message, and it's just a continual conversation. And you listen to the last message, and it might be. And I always say to my friends, leave as mundane a message as you can. I don't care if someone's broken their foot, and I don't care if you don't know where the ants are coming from in your kitchen. I want to know. And so if it's 30 seconds, a minute, sometimes they go for 11 minutes. But it forces you to sit there and listen to them without jumping in, without trying to solve a problem. Then you can stop, think about how can I add to the conversation, or should I just say, I've got a problem. And that opened up a level of reducing the gap that I felt with my friends more than anything else. The ability to hear them every day. They didn't have to send me a message. They didn't have to send me a dumb reel on Instagram, although I do love that. I really love that. The dumber, the better. But I like that thought of like, I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to hear messages from my friends, and we're talking to each other continually, and that won't stop. And so when I see them, and a lot of your best mates as well, and we all know this, but we forget. Your good mates, you pick up, you sit down and you go, so anyway, like I was saying 5 years ago.
That's the best mate.
And that's the best mate.
That's the best.
I got a mate of mine in Melbourne who's got I've known since I met my wife. And I know that if I see him, he'll leave me a voice note that goes, anyway, so as I was saying. And I know that's how he's going to be. And I love and cherish that. The other thing I would say is tell your mates you love them. Because when you're losing, you can't. You can't. And you don't want to be that guy that's left with the I love you. You want to put the I love you out there. I say I love you too much to people, but because I'm A, needy. That's been well established. B, I believe that you don't want to be left with the I love you on your lap. Give it to them. So no matter what happens, they've got it.
It's the hardest thing for blokes to say. They don't say it.
Isn't it tough?
Yeah, it is.
You know? And but I just, I don't know. I'm pretty hopeful for the millennials and the Gen Zs. I think they got it together. The exes are being notoriously quiet. I'm worried about my exes. I'm worried about what we're doing. Us, like, that period of time, we all had great times going outside and we didn't have phones and we all, we could be home when the lights are on and all that stuff, but now we're a little on the quiet side. And I'm hoping that we're okay. But if you can tell your mates you love them and all this stuff, it's perfect.
I generally ask questions of my guests, 3 or 4 quiz questions.
Oh,
Don't
let's
think
go.
about it too much.
Hands on buzzers?
Hands on buzzers. Yep.
That's it.
So what's the biggest misconception about Dave Campbell?
That I don't know what the biggest misconception might be. I don't worry about what people's misconceptions of me are. I think maybe I used to, because I was going to say something. But I try now, because of who I am on TV and the show that I have to do. I try to bring more of myself into it. So I try to be as authentic as I can. But yeah, maybe the biggest misconception is that I seem to have more energy than I have. I'm actually more tired than you think.
Okay. What's your guilty pleasure that you're prepared to admit to on this podcast?
Oh, no. Listen, I'm sober. Listen, a lot of my guilty pleasures are gone. My guilty pleasure, I do love a silly video on social media with my wife at night when the kids are asleep. That seems to be something that we love laughing. She has the best laugh. So yeah, that.
What is one thing you can't live without, family aside?
I couldn't live without music. Not necessarily that I listen to it much as I used to when I was younger, but the ability to have it in my life. It's been a lifesaver for me. It has affected my moods. It has brought me out of moods. It has made me feel elated, whether I'm on stage or in a crowd of people. I mean, I'm so looking forward to the Oasis concert because I know I'm going to be a crowd of people that's going to be just having, like, it's going to vibrate at such a high level. And I find that so exciting, so music.
What's next for Dave Campbell?
Tomorrow. And the day after that. And planning on looking after myself so I can be with my kids when I'm older, have mostly, touch wood, all my facilities, and be able to play and have a good time.
If Dave Campbell today had the opportunity to go and whisper into the 19-year-old Dave Campbell's ear when he was 19, what's the one thing you'd say to him?
Get therapy now. Find a therapist, a cheap one. Go to a counseling session. It's going to be all right. Get over this stuff. It's going to be okay. And that young 19-year-old would tell me to go myself. Because that's what I was at that age. I was so, shut down. And so, when you know. I mean, I can't judge who that kid was. And so, it happens when it happens.
David Campbell, thank you for coming on Uncommon Ground. It's a great discussion.
I really appreciate your time, Talal. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you've got something out of this conversation, I encourage you to share it, rate it, or leave a review, as it really helps others find the show. And if you're not already subscribed, hit the button on your podcast app or on YouTube at Talal Yassine. We drop episodes every fortnight, each one a deep dive with someone who isn't afraid to speak their mind or stand their ground. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and don't be afraid to challenge the status quo.